have held for decades. If America becomes too dependent on AI in healthcare, questions will arise over the risk of medical privacy, cyber hacks and ransomware, and whether your health should be decided by a programmed robot or a trained doctor. So the question for us tonight is, if America becomes too dependent on AI in healthcare, questions will arise over the risk of medical privacy, real-life doctors, cyber hacks and ransomware, and whether your health should be decided by a programmed robot or a trained doctor. So the question for us tonight is, if America becomes too dependent on AI in healthcare, questions will arise over the risk of medical privacy, real-life doctors, cyber hacks and ransomware, and whether your health should be decided by a programmed robot or a trained doctor. So the question for us tonight is, if America becomes too dependent on AI in healthcare,
just give us a few moments, everyone. We'll get the video back started.
I'm sorry, the AI robots took over and they started doing something a little strange there, but I think we're back on target now. We'll start it right here with the debate.
I think this is a very interesting topic that we're beginning with, for the great health debates. And interestingly, Stephen Hawking said that artificial intelligence, or AI, has the ability to destroy mankind. So I think that is, fairly ominous to say. But then interestingly, medical futurist, quite famous one, said that he believes that AI is the 21st century's stethoscope, which is fairly interesting. So there's a lot of promise and peril, to AI, not only within healthcare, as we're speaking about today, but then in a lot of other areas as well, like the criminal justice system.
Yes, no, I mean, you really make a good point, and that's a great quote about AI being America, like the medical landscape stethoscope, because not only is it going to improve like medical care, and we've seen that, but it also shines a light on health inequities in this country. Because as we introduce more and more technology, especially through smartphones, I mean, just in the past few years alone, we've seen folks being able to track their insulin through their smartphones, being able to report that data to their doctor. And we all know that what patients say and what is actually happening sometimes can be a bit different. So doctors being able to have that longitudinal data to make really sharp and precise diagnoses is incredible. However, not everybody has a cell phone. Not everybody is in a position where they could have a plan or anything. So we really need to keep that in mind as we talk about AI being this great step up. Because if we have one part of the population really engaged in precision medicine and this personalized care, and another sector of the population being without it, then you might be introducing inadvertently new disparities.
Right, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Dr. LeCompte. And it's interesting, when Dr. Robb framed the question, can and should AI replace real-life doctors, I think increasingly we're seeing that AI can, in fact, replace real-life doctors. And in many ways, we've seen that within radiology, within pathology, in different areas of, say, infectious disease or neurological disease, heart disease. But the other question you bring up about like health equity, should it? And I think that's an ethical and moral issue as well. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what the debaters actually bring to today.
Yes, I'm not envious of the debate. This is a really difficult subject. I'm very excited. We have two folks who are just incredible representatives of their field. So we're very fortunate to have them.
Right, absolutely. I know we have a radiologist, and we also have someone from the pharmaceutical medical device space. So it's very interesting to see how the two of them differentiate themselves. But I think for me, just kind of the nuances that might exist. As they said, they're talking about health equity issues, ethical and moral issues. What I wanted to mention too is that there was a recent study that came out in the Harvard Business Review about the fact that if humans have the ability to choose between an AI robot versus a physician, that they actually decide to choose a physician, even if they know that the physician might be less efficient, might be less accurate than AI. And often they're citing things like trust, empathy, and humanistic connection as the reason why that they would choose the real life doctor over AI.
Well, that's a really good point that you make, because no matter how incredible your NLP, your machine learning program can emulate a doctor, at the end of the day, it's not a human being. And the other thing that it can't do is really detect nuance. So AI can diagnose, but it may not be able to tell you why the diagnosis occurred or is happening. The other thing it can't really take into account is the circumstances or the lived experiences of the patient. So if you have someone who is experiencing housing instability, food insecurity, if they're engaged in, drug use or whatever, the computer is not going to know. The other thing that is really interesting is just AI's applicability, because I was also thinking in one way AI can really help a medical doctor, because it can go into places that human beings might not be able to, if there's a war or we saw with COVID. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you go out to a really rural area in the US or to other countries in the world where they don't have a lot of electricity or an electrical grid to support it, where are you going to plug things in? So you really do need that human touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And 2 points that I thought were very interesting as we're talking about, humanistic touch. I think I mentioned this to you on the chat up, here. When's the last time that you actually had your doctor hold your hand when they gave you a diagnosis? So it's interesting, because there is a lot of friction between whether or not doctors are already losing a humanistic touch, and then this argument that's saying that AI cannot have that human touch. So that's kind of an interesting point. And then kind of the other things that you mentioned as well, kind of the social determinants of health that the AI can't take into account, but yet a human being can take into account.
So no, and I also am hoping that the debaters today will talk about a bit about cultural competency when it comes to AI, because we all know that AI is right now being developed in some of the sort of highfalutin institutions in the US and other high income countries. And being baked in, as you were saying earlier today, may be some inadvertent sort of biases that may not take into account the lived experiences of those who would be availing themselves of this technology. So I look forward to hearing about that from our debaters.
Yeah, excellent point. Definitely, there's been a lot of research. I know I actually even published a piece in Oxford Business Review on the fact that depending on the type of person who's actually creating the AI proprietary information, what type of data sets are being used, the type of bias that could be anywhere from racial, ethnic, gender bias, sexual orientation bias, lots of different things that can be baked in. But then also the question when you're talking about health equity and not being able to have access is we all know that not everything is adopted whole scale or in a standardized fashion. So there can also be, where is AI going to be implemented first? If it's implemented in wealthier regions, then you're going to definitely have that exacerbation of health disparities versus if there's a reprioritization of where we implement the AI in say rural areas or areas with marginalized communities. But I definitely think I'm looking forward to getting into this, and we can hash this out later and see how the debaters do.
Thanks so much.
Doctors, thank you for weighing in. Please stand by. We'll bring you back after the debate momentarily. Now, let's get into tonight's meat and potatoes. Joining us are two of the foremost experts on the topic of AI and robots. We have Dr. Don Davis, who's the president of 5280 Life Sciences, and he is from the pharmaceutical industry, as well as Dr. Jane Anderson, an orthopedic surgeon turned radiologist. We're excited to have you both. Thank you for coming in. Now, let us set the ground rules for today's debate. So one expert will actually present an opening argument, and then one of you will rebut their opening argument before you go into a hot seat section with me, where I'll ask you individual questions to which your opponent can respond. After this section, you two can then cross-examine each other before we turn it back to closing statements for you all and back to our analysts. So debaters, do you agree on the ground rules?
Yes.
Agree.
All right, let's jazz it up. So Dr. Anderson, First to you, opening statement, please.
An opening statement, great. Didn't know that I had to have one of those, so I apologize in advance.
No.
I
Please.
would just say that I am arguing against AI ever replacing physicians, real life physicians. I would say that medicine is simply too complex to allow algorithms or machines or deep learning to lead healthcare. You know, when a patient is diagnosed with cancer, who has the discussion with the patient about their options? You know, should we treat aggressively? Should we not treat? Should we observe? You know, medicine is not just about the diagnosis. When a patient passes away, who has the discussion with the family that, you know, we did all we could do to save them? This medicine is an art that requires human emotional intelligence and finesse.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Anderson. Dr. Davis, your rebuttal, please.
So in part, I agree with Jade that, with Dr. Anderson, that that AI shouldn't replace physicians. However, I think we've all seen sort of the physicians in the world that also more or less are just following checklists. If you're that kind of physician where you're typically just following a checklist, not showing your patients empathy, and also not really applying scientific knowledge, then I would say AI probably could replace you. However, if you're somebody as a physician who is being empathetic to your patients, who's applying nonlinear thinking in terms of, I give you X amount of inputs and then expect a certain output, as well as applying your scientific training that you've sort of based your career on, then I would strongly say that AI cannot replace that. I would say that, we are a long way off. And I think, as well in the opening comments, I heard, this idea that you could have something like the singularity, which is what Stephen Hawking really is talking about whenever he says that they could destroy mankind. We're far off from that, and still today we're doing things, very linearly with regards to AI in the space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis and Dr. Anderson, for your opening remarks and rebuttals. Now, Dr. Anderson, is there any merit to what Dr. Davis just said?
I agree with him. I was writing down my notes when he was saying regarding the checklist and the physician. So that is not how the physician is trained. Now, you said, should AI robots replace real life doctors? So there's a lot of doctors in healthcare right now, and that includes PAs, NPs, et cetera. I agree, our training is completely different. It is not the same, and they are not trained to the degree that we are. So with those checklists, which is what I've encountered when interacting with them, that is how they operate. Again, however, I do not believe that is how the physician is trained, and it does not apply to us.
Fantastic. Dr. Davis, do you have a response to that?
So I, all in all, I would say that I agree again with Dr. Anderson that, overall, you don't see people following checklists, in and out. However, I've certainly encountered myself as a patient, physicians who aren't as empathetic as they might be, and they do follow more or less kind of a series of steps that they believe will lead them to a diagnosis. And I believe, having this broad sense of thinking is what differentiates a physician from AI.
That's fantastic. Now, Dr. Davis, is it possible to guard against potential biases built into AI by programmers who may be unaware of their own biases?
So I think I at least believe that the programmers are less of the issue and much more the training sets that are used for AI. One example that I'm very aware of is that there's an AI capability currently that's available that stopped taking inputs around 2019. The one problem with that is that it doesn't know about COVID. So one example might be that if you were to point this particular artificial intelligence capability at COVID, it might not exactly understand it. It still should understand spike protein viruses because it would have things like SARS and MERS to kind of base itself off of. However, at the same time, it doesn't exactly know what the rest of the population has gone through with regards to COVID. And so there's an opportunity for sure for bias to creep in. But I think the way to again, think through possibly overcoming some of this is continuing to retrain the artificial intelligence.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Dr. Anderson, what is your response to that?
So I do have a little bit of a different take. I do believe it is possible to guard against potential bias, but definitely not prevent it in its entirety. So, this is a constant ongoing issue in healthcare right now, which is why we still have healthcare disparities. So the only way to mitigate potential bias in healthcare AI design by its programmers is to incorporate, a diverse team of consultant physicians when these algorithms are being built. And I'm talking about, as Dr. Carpenter mentioned earlier, I'm talking about an equal number of physicians with different gender identities, different ages, different ethnicities, different religions, different training backgrounds. So these decisions or recognition elements that AI uses would then have to be tested on a large, diverse population. So only then could you possibly ensure that these algorithms can encompass, the diverse set of patients that we see on a daily basis.
Thank you for that, Dr. Anderson. We're going to go back to you actually as well. And my thought is, or my question is it a good or a bad thing that big tech is increasingly taking over healthcare? And people like Don Davis, who are in pharmaceuticals and medical devices, is it a good thing that they're coming in more and more? What say you?
So big tech in healthcare is a double-edged sword. So on one hand, big tech has the financial ability to fund research and cutting-edge technologies that patients and their physicians can access to improve, diagnosis and treatment of disease. However, on the other hand, big tech does not employ the same ethical standards that physicians are held to. So, for example, atomic research has allowed us to target and treat cancer cells in nuclear medicine. However, atomic research has also been used, obviously, as a devastating, destructive weapon in war. So we as physicians took an oath to do no harm. So in order to ensure that big tech is keeping, the patients and the physicians' best interests at heart, there would need to be, I think, governmental regulations and policies in place. And then in addition to that, there would need to be, regular internal audits as, loopholes always emerge in these circumstances.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Now, Dr. Davis, Dr. Anderson just said that your industry isn't as ethical as other parts of the medical industry. So what is your take to all of this?
I guess I differ in terms of what I heard. What I heard was that definitely larger corporations could provide additional funding with regards to healthcare research. However, with regards to having larger companies, let's just take Microsoft as an example. Microsoft has Microsoft Healthcare, and they definitely have been working on different aspects of healthcare for quite a while. I still think that they're far off from actually being able to provide something that is a usable tool in this space.
Fantastic. And Dr. Davis, we're going to go back to you. So in what specific ways is AI supporting or undermining the broader public health agenda that Dr. Anderson talked about just a minute ago?
Yeah, so I definitely think that if you think about a physician's week, today, as of today, it's stated that physicians spend about 9 hours per week in deep administrative work. All of that could be turned over to artificial intelligence. All of it could be essentially lifted from the physician's shoulders, leaving them more time to be empathetic to their patients, spend time thinking about patient problems that maybe aren't necessarily easily solved, but yet are things that they could, again, base their training on to come back to.
Fantastic. And Dr. Anderson, your response?
So again, it's kind of another double-edged sword. So I believe that AI is doing both. So AI supports the public health agenda with basically, Dr. Rob, with what you mentioned earlier. So one, by being able to gather and quickly process large amounts of data and provide immediate analysis. This saves time, which, eventually leads to healthcare cost savings for the physician-patient encounter. For example, in that rural-based patient with diabetes who wears an at-home monitor, AI can alert the patient's physician in real time when acute conditions such as diabetic ketoacidosis. So diabetic ketoacidosis is a buildup of acids in your blood, which can be life-threatening should that happen. AI could also allow, they currently also allows minimally invasive robotic surgery, such as the Da Vinci machine. So that's where the surgeon is sitting at a console, usually in the operating room, but they're remotely operating the machine. So this allows for smaller incisions, increased surgeon precision. This results in decreased tissue damage and blood loss, which eventually will lead to improved postoperative pain, hopefully, and decreased length of hospital stay. So where AI is kind of undermining the public health agenda is its accumulation of a colossal patient data set that is not protected. HIPAA, or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which protects sensitive patient health information from being disclosed without their consent or knowledge. This does not apply to tech companies who are developing AI. So theoretically, people who have given DNA, including myself, for ancestry testing could have their data sold to insurance companies, which would allow these insurance companies to make biased decisions when deciding to insure them.
Fantastic. And final question, and we'll start with you, Dr. Anderson. So if Microsoft achieves its vision and companies like Microsoft achieve their vision in terms of really being able to put out AI to the utmost of their ability, what are the social justice and health equity issues related to it? Should our country allow this, and who gets to decide?
So, they are already encroaching, as you said, and taking a stake within the medical industry. And, the issue with the current corporatization of medicine is that it's turned healthcare into simply meeting metrics and controlling expenditures and budgets instead of actually putting the patient first, even if that wasn't the original intent. So this has honestly led to a significant physician burnout and decreased quality of care, because that trickles down, right? Due to the buildup of the red tape that we're experiencing, where people who have not trained at medical school are making medical decisions for patients and physicians. I have experienced this firsthand from a physician standpoint and through the eyes of my mom, who's currently going through cancer treatments herself for the third time around.
And Dr. Davis, your response, please.
Yeah, I find myself agreeing with my debate partner here that I do believe that continued guards need to be put in place to watch out for areas where information and bias, both could be at risk with regards to utilizing AI.
Fantastic. And now my segment is over. And now we're going to go into what we call cross-examination. So Dr. Davis and Dr. Anderson, you both will be able to ask each other up to 2 questions each on any issue related to AI and robots. And let's start with you, Dr. Davis.
So my first question really for Dr. Anderson is, in your practice today, do you use artificial intelligence?
Absolutely. So we do use artificial intelligence with the sense of, let's just say, breast imaging. We have CAD. So CAD is an intelligence that in your mammogram, there are certain patterns of calcifications or masses that would raise a red flag that the radiologist can use to take a second look back at the mammogram that they already read. So I'll read a mammogram, I'll go through it, and at the end, I'll turn on the CAD and I'll say, oh, I didn't see those faint calcifications here. Let me go back and take a second look. So I can decide to agree, yes, this is something I should be concerned about, or no, this is something I should not be concerned about. So again, AI, I believe, should be an asset, but not a replacement.
And one more question, Dr. Davis.
in terms of the future for radiology, what would you like to see next in AI?
I have a prime example. Yesterday, I was reading a CT chest, and the patient had a myriad of nodules, pulmonary nodules throughout their lungs, and so many previous CT chests that I had to compare them to see growth over time, to see if it was new. Is this something we're not concerned about? Is it just an area of scarring or atelectasis? So it would have been nice for actually AI to say, this nodule has been stable dating back to 2013. So we're going to consider this benign, based off of ACR recommendations and all of the published research that we have in terms of following pulmonary nodules. So that would have been very helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Now your cross-examination of Dr. Davis.
So Dr. Davis, my main question is, how does, big tech plan on protecting patients' data?
So that's a good question. I mean, I primarily don't work with big tech companies. I think that it's going to be an ongoing challenge for a lot of companies. I mean, I think companies like Microsoft and others that are in the space like Google, for sure, continuing to protect patient data is going to be a challenge for them. We see it every day that more and more information is uncovered that they know about each and every one of us. And I certainly, want them to have the information that would power decisions with regards to my personal health care, but I don't necessarily, want them to have information that they don't necessarily need at that point in time. The other thing I would add to this point, though, too, is that right now, today, to discover one drug and work it all the way through the entire pipeline costs billions of dollars. And so in this same sort of thought in terms of protecting health information and making sure that we have the right information at hand is the idea that maybe if the artificial intelligence had more information and understood more about human reactions in medicines, we might be able to actually, one, shrink the drug discovery life cycle, and two, extremely reduce that same cost.
Fantastic. And any more questions, Dr. Anderson, for Dr. Davis?
So actually, Dr. Davis, hearing about what I said today regarding the corporatization of medicine and how it's leading to physician burnout and decreased quality of care, do you still agree that the corporatization of medicine should be occurring?
No, I actually think that, I honestly am strongly in favor of utilizing AI to reduce the workload. I certainly don't want more and more, essentially metrics and things put on people that force them to be less empathetic and spend less time with their patients. I think that's wrong for everybody. I think the right sort of direction to go here is to, utilize the tools and technology that we have to best enhance the overall patient experience.
Fantastic. And since Dr. Anderson, you went first in your opening statement, Dr. Davis, would you please close us out in your closing statement?
Sure. So I guess my thought is that, again, I would think that AI could augment what a doctor does and help enhance that overall care that patients get. This in our ability to think nonlinearly or to be able to apply scientific knowledge, I don't think that we're at that point yet. I don't know that we'll ever be at that point of having something that is not a human looking at a human and saying, how should we treat your cancer? To Dr. Anderson's very good point. I do think that, however, that this technology could strongly enhance the capabilities of a physician and hopefully start to help them with their workday with regards to very menial tasks and keeping them away from having to spend hours and hours of administrative work to be able to serve the patients that they see.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. And Dr. Anderson.
So I do agree with Dr. Davis, actually. So no, obviously AI should not replace physicians, but AI should be used as an optional tool in a physician's daily practice toolbox. For example, AI cannot improve care in the sense that when does it know to utilize off-label chemo again? I said this earlier, you cannot replace the physician-patient relationship. How can a patient build trust with a machine regarding their medical decisions? And I do hate to say this, but I grew up in an insurance and medical malpractice household. So if something does go wrong, who's going to be the liable party in that situation? So that's another thought to think about. So no, AI should not replace physicians.
Doctors, thank you so much for this fantastic debate. We really appreciate both very salient points. We're going to turn it back to our analysts to get their post-debate analysis.
Yeah, what do you think?
Why, Dr. Carpenter, what incredible arguments on both sides. Just really nuanced delineation of these very challenging issues. I really appreciated the addressing medical malpractice at the end, because I have to say it's unclear to me if something did go wrong with AI, who exactly would be held responsible. Right now, we know it would be the doctor who was in charge. But it's less clear when you're using AI technology. And I also appreciated addressing the all this data that's being collected longitudinally, especially when it comes to DNA, that it's not being protected. So one of the things that in our legislative system in the US, and I'm sure around other countries around the world, that laws are not keeping pace with technology and technological advancements. So that's certainly something we're going to need to address moving forward. I was wondering, what are some of the things that you heard?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I mean, both sides brought up, I think, incredible points that I think definitely need further exploration, definitely for the audience. That's definitely what we'd like to see people do afterwards. But completely agree with you. Like, the accountability point is huge, whether or not this lies with the physician, with the medical center employing the AI technology, the actual designers of the AI. That becomes incredibly complicated, not only for the patient, but also from a legal standpoint. The other things as well, the aspects that you mentioned about protectionism of the data is important. And then we really talked a lot about biases as well, and whether or not this is something, as Dr. Anderson mentioned, because of a diverse team, that we can be able to a certain extent, eschew some of these biases, but not completely eradicate them. Or if it's a matter of, as Dr. Davis was saying, the size of the data set. And there's been a lot of research and propositions that AI should continue to have larger and larger data sets and be able to self-learn over time, to be able to address those differences and all the different demographics that it might be having to deal with, say, in a healthcare setting. The few things that I hope to see in the debate that I didn't hear as much conversation about, I know time is definitely constrained, is how telemedicine and telehealth is, to me, a harbinger of AI and how that can be in the future. Right now, it's being used as an assistive device, but I could easily see the trajectory of telehealth and telemedicine where you remove the actor, the physician, the nurse practitioner, the physician assistant, and then you just have that, you have AI utilizing telehealth and telemedicine. So I see that potentially as a pathway for AI forging forward and removing doctors. That, I think, answers the can question. The other thing is that neither debater addressed, but I think we should all think about very seriously, is who's making the decision. I think a lot of these things are happening via Google, Microsoft, Amazon, different pharmaceutical companies, obviously different academic medical centers of AI moving forward. But is this all just kind of a synergy happening and no one is truly in charge? And as you said, the government, regulators are striving to catch up, but are we coming to an outcome where the decision is not being made unilaterally or multilaterally? It's just something that just kind of, if you know what I mean, collapses on us because no one's kind of made a decision that they're going to be the one to decide, that we're all just throwing our hands into the pot, and then we have this future that no one's officially decided on or even really imagined.
No, I think you raise a really good point there, because there should be some sort of ordered movement as we go forward with AI. You don't want someone to emerge a winner in this field. This is a field that's it's, really is life or death, literally, and has the potential of, exacerbating existing inequities. So we really need nuanced. It really needs to be thought through. The other thing with AI is transportability. Right now, a lot of AI is being developed in the West, but I can't imagine it being deployed in different countries with different populations, different lived experiences with the same success. So just as those who are developing the algorithm should be representative, the data that's being used to create these algorithms needs to be representative as well. It needs to be very thoughtful. So there's a lot of actors that need to come together and make this happen. So I did not envy today's debaters. They did an amazing job.
Yes, absolutely. And I would say too, about your point about the actors, just thinking about, we've been, very US centric because that's where we are, but I was just thinking about when you say multiple actors, is each country making its own decisions, say the way we've made our decisions about how the COVID vaccines have been distributed, is the same thing? Is each country going to be making decisions about AI and how it's being deployed? Or is this something that, are we going to have, say, the WHO or other organizations that have that multilaterality come together and make these decisions collectively for the globe?
Yes, and I can imagine if you did have that, you saw that with the COVID pandemic, a lot of folks having a lot of mistrust around that, and you don't want to accidentally create mistrust around AI.
Absolutely.
Because certainly both debaters really raised, it's very helpful. It really streamlines doctors' work days. It helps create more robust sort of precision medicine for patients, and it can be quite beneficial. And in fact, a doctor who is less harried is able to take that time to be more empathetic. And certainly as telemedicine has become more widespread and uptake has become greater because out of necessity, really, you really need that more heightened empathy on the delivery end.
Right, absolutely. And I think, for me, my final thought would be that where I rest, and I hope the audience, definitely does more research and decides where they stand on this, is that I would say that I would want AI to be augmenting and accelerating what physicians do, definitely what, I myself do within the OR when I see my patients in the emergency department, et cetera, and that we do have these ethical and moral boundaries, with the way that AI is deployed and whom it can replace, because inevitably I think there will be some people who will be replaced, but then there'll be an emergence of new types of characters that we've yet to really know who they are.
Oh, that's such an excellent point that you raised there. And I certainly see AI moving forward, not only benefiting doctors in sort of mainstream offices, but also in hospitals as well as community health centers, and just really being able to help patients, whether they're in person or through a portal, and connecting them not only with healthcare, but with services and the like in a more expeditious and equitable fashion. So really seeing it as a way to increase equity as opposed to increasing inequities that we have now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, doctors, thank you so much for that beautiful analysis, and thank you to our debaters for today's debate. That's all the time we have for today's episode. Be sure to check us out on our website at hphr.org, where we bring you the best information about public health. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I wanted to apologize. I didn't have a chance to introduce myself or my colleague. My name is Dr. Circe Lecomte. I'm co-CEO of BCPH, and also wanted to hand this off to my colleague.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for attending this one. We hope you enjoyed it, and feel free to fill out the feedback form and join us for some of the upcoming webinars in the upcoming weeks.
Yes, and apologies again for letting the robots take over the streaming for a moment with the multiple echoing piece, but look forward to having you next week. Bye-bye.